This unit is about states of consciousness. Your conscious level would be your consciousness. This is your awareness of yourself and your surroundings, what you're focused on. A non-conscious level would be processes that you're unaware of. This would be like your heartbeat and your breathing. You're unaware of them unless there's a problem. A pre-conscious level would mean these are things that you were once conscious of or thinking of, but you're not right now. But you could bring them to the surface if you were asked. For example, this might be a past memory. If I ask you, what was your favorite toy as a child? You think about it for a few seconds, and then you can bring it to your conscious awareness. In this lesson, we will focus on an altered state of consciousness, sleep, and dreams, as well as hypnosis and psychoactive drugs. We have different biological rhythms or periodic physiological fluctuations. Our periods of being asleep and awake fall under this category of biological rhythms. There are different types: annual rhythms, monthly rhythms, and daily rhythms. An example of an annual fluctuation, maybe we tend to be happier when we have more sunshine in the summer months as opposed to the winter months. Or with animals, they hibernate in the winter. That would be an annual fluctuation. A monthly biological rhythm, a good example here would be a menstrual cycle for females. A daily rhythm, they're also called circadian rhythms. And as I said, this is a 24-hour biological fluctuation. One example would be body temperature. Throughout a 24-hour period, your body temperature will alter by 1 degree. It is at its highest point when the sun is going down. So if you've ever had a fever, you may notice it towards the late afternoon or early evening hours. And it's at its lowest point when the sun is coming up in the morning. So if you've ever woken up in the morning and your fever is broken and your bed is soaked with sweat, that's because your temperature is at its lowest point at that time. Another example, which we're going to focus more on, is the period of being asleep and awake, which operates on this daily rhythm or circadian rhythm. So at night, when the sun is going down, melatonin is released from the pineal gland. Melatonin is a hormone that makes us sleepy. In an adolescent brain, melatonin is released later than an adult and a young child. Most adults, the melatonin is released around 9 o'clock, and that's why your parents are sitting on the couch very sleepy by 10 o'clock. In the adolescent brain, it is not released until around 11 p.m. Therefore, you do not get sleepy until after that time. Unfortunately, we make you operate on an adult schedule and get up by, let's say, 6 o'clock in order to get to school by 7, and therefore you're never going to be fully rested. Some schools have piloted programs for a later start time because of this, and so they go in later. The classes are a little bit more condensed. They may go a little bit longer in the day. But they do find that because of this later start time, children are more alert and getting more sleep, so attendance rates go up, and also test scores tend to go up as well. In the morning, as the light and the sun comes up and light triggers the suprachiasmatic nucleus, that melatonin decreases and causes us to become alert. Now, being asleep at night and awake during the day just does not involve this light cycle. They did a study in the 1970s where they put some volunteers deep in a cave for several months. The participants did not have access to a clock or the outside world in any form. They had no live television or live radio, no windows, so they had no idea what time it was. They were curious to find out, would these people sleep when it was actually dark out, when they had no idea, and be awake during daylight hours, or would their bodies become confused? And even though they did not have any idea what time it was, they did still sleep during the nighttime hours and were awake during the daytime hours. And since they had no alarm clocks or any way to wake them up, any noise, most of the participants got about 9 hours of sleep and felt very rested. So even though the melatonin, is secreted when the sun goes down and it shuts off as light is entering our world in the morning, we still have some internal biological clock that makes us sleep at night and be awake during the day. Furthermore, our bodies don't like it when our circadian rhythm is out of whack. This is why we feel miserable if we cross different time zones and we experience that jet lag, or if people work shift work and work cat-eye or other rotating shifts, they feel miserable. Our bodies like consistency. You may have slept in during the weekend. Let's say you sleep in until like noon on a Saturday, and throughout the day you're just so sleepy and you can't figure out why, because you got so much extra sleep. And it's because your circadian rhythm is off. Again, if we're consistent in our sleep patterns, we will feel better and more rested. While we're sleeping, we transition through 5 different stages. Each stage shows a different brainwave pattern. These brainwaves can be seen on an electroencephalogram machine. It takes roughly 90 minutes to cycle through the 5 stages, and then we go through many cycles throughout the night. I'm going to talk a little bit about each stage and also identify what brainwave pattern you would see in that stage. First of all, before we fall asleep, the brainwave patterns that we have when we're awake are called alpha waves, which you can see in the box in the bottom right in blue. They are very rapid and small waves. That means our brain is active. While we are alert, hopefully, our brain is very active, showing these alpha waves. During stage 1, this is when you first start to doze off. This is when your muscles are just starting to relax, your breathing and your heart rate are decreasing. A lot of times when you're in this stage, if someone were to nudge you, you would say, I wasn't asleep, because this is just that initial starting to drift off. Sometimes this is referred to as hypnagogic or hallucinogenic sleep, because it's like you're hallucinating, as you may have experienced this in class. You're starting to doze off in class, but yet you can hear that teacher's voice, and it's like you're hallucinating. Your brain waves are still pretty active here. You can see theta waves under stage 1 there in green. So they're still pretty active because you're just now drifting off. You only ever experience stage 1 once. You're never this alert again throughout the night unless you would get up for any reason. You would not go through this again. This stage can take from 5 to 15 minutes to transition through. If you're really tired, you may go through this in 5 minutes. If you're pretty well rested, it may take about 15 minutes. You may have noticed sometimes when you're starting to drift off, your muscles will jerk at the beginning of sleep. And that's called a myoclonic jerk, and that's perfectly natural and very common. It's because your muscles are just starting to relax here. So after about 15 minutes on average, you're going to transition into stage 2. Stage 2 is like a transition stage. You're going from an awake, alert brain, and after this stage, you'll go into a very sleepy brain or inactive brain. So you're going to see a little bit of theta waves, with also transitioning into the deeper delta waves that are coming next. You'll see sleep spindles, which you can see under stage 2 on the chart. So these are short bursts of rapid waves, and then you'll see the larger delta waves coming. Again, it's transitioning you from a very awake or alert brain to a very sleepy and inactive brain. During this stage, the heart rate and the breathing also start to decrease a little bit more. Your muscles relax more. This stage usually takes about 15 minutes to transition through. So now you've been asleep for about a half an hour, and you're going to go into stage 3 and 4, which used to be distinct stages, separated stages, but since they have the same brainwave pattern, they've been combined. So it's stage 3 and 4 are basically together. Here you're showing delta waves in stage 3 and 4, which are very large, slow waves, meaning that your brain is now inactive. So you have a very sleepy brain. And a lot of times this stage is now called delta sleep or deep sleep. So as you go from 3 to 4, which takes about a half hour to go through both of these, your brain becomes more and more inactive. The delta waves become larger as you progress through this stage. During this stage, your mind's at complete rest, so you are very disoriented, and if you feel very groggy if you woke up. When you wake up in the morning, if you feel like you've been hit by a truck and you're just so tired, you probably woke up in this stage. It's going to take your mind a little while to catch up and become active. During this stage, your mind is inactive, but your body's active. So if you get up and you sleepwalk, or if you sleep talk, or you're moving around in your bed, that is usually happening during this deep sleep stage. Okay, at night, the growth hormone is released, and that's released during this stage. This stage is sometimes called restorative sleep. The wear and tear on the body throughout the day, your tissue is repaired during this stage, and also the growth hormone is released during this stage. So you've been asleep about a half an hour. Now all of a sudden your brain is going to speed back up just within several seconds. You're going to go from 4 to 3 to 2, but not back into 1. Again, you only go through 1 when you first fall asleep. So you go 4, 3, 2, and then bam, you go into stage 5, also known as REM. So stage 5 is called REM sleep. REM stands for rapid eye movement, and as you can see in the far left picture of the little boy, his eyes are moving back and forth. That's how you can tell if someone is in REM. It's almost as if they're watching a story. And during REM sleep, your eyes are moving back and forth, and this is when you dream. So this is also called dream sleep, and your brain becomes very active. And here you're showing beta waves. So beta waves are very similar to the alpha and the theta waves because, again, now your brain is active again. So your brain is active and you're dreaming, and your body is immobile, it's paralyzed. So sometimes this is called paradoxical sleep. So in stage 4, your mind was at rest, but your body's active. Now here in stage 5, or REM, your body is paralyzed, but your mind is active, so it's the opposite. But that's a good thing. You wouldn't want to get up and move and act out your dreams. So during this time, your body is inactive. Eugene Azarinsky in the 1950s was working on an EEG machine, and he is the one who identified the rapid eye movement that occurs during this stage. This stage lasts roughly 30 minutes. So now you've went through the whole 90-minute sleep cycle. As you can see from this chart, early in the night we spend more time in stage 4, and this is our restorative sleep, so that's good. Towards morning, you're more likely to wake up in a dream because we have more REM sleep. the longer we sleep. Our sleep requirements change as we get older. As you can see from the chart, infants, and newborns will sleep up to 20 hours a day, and that tends to decrease as we age. We don't need as much sleep throughout the night. There is a spike again during the adolescent years when we go through puberty, and the release of that growth hormone at night makes us more sleepy again. Why do we sleep? Well, we know it's important. We spend about a third of our lives sleeping. And if we are deprived of sleep, that can take a huge toll on the body. We need our rest in order to restore body tissue. We consolidate memories while we sleep, which we'll look at when we talk about the upcoming dream theory. So your hormones, your lymphocytes are all released at this during sleep. Your lymphocytes are like your white blood cells that help keep you from getting sick and help fight off different bacteria or viruses. So if you are deprived of sleep, your immune system is weakened and you're more prone to get sick. So as I said, going without sleep can take a huge toll on our body. Obviously, we become fatigued if we don't get enough sleep. We find it difficult to concentrate, remember things. Our growth is impaired, and as I said, your immune system is weakened. Our metabolism tends to slow when we go without sleep. Our body is low on energy, so it can lead to weight gain. We feel sluggish, but we start to crave foods that will give us energy because we didn't get enough sleep. So we usually turn to like carbs or things that are bad for us and can cause us to gain weight. Going without sleep can deprive the skin of nutrients that it needs and cause the skin to lose its elasticity and cause wrinkles. Because neural connections or neural impulses are delayed when we are very tired. It's almost like being under the influence of alcohol. So that is why truck drivers have restrictions on how many hours they can drive, because when we are going without sleep, it takes us longer to react to some stimuli that occurs in front of us. And as a result of that, there is an increased risk of accidents. A few sleep disorders. First of all, insomnia. This is very common. About 1 in 5 people will suffer from insomnia at some point in their life. This is the inability to fall asleep, or sometimes you fall asleep and then a couple hours later you wake up and then you just can't get back to sleep. This is usually due to some situation or something stressful going on in one's life. It usually isn't chronic throughout life. It's not believed to be, obviously, something that's genetic. Our experts recommend that you maybe leave a notepad beside your desk or by your bed. A lot of people say they just can't put their mind at rest. They're having all these ideas, and that's why they can't fall asleep. So maybe writing them down will help you think, okay, I'll visit this tomorrow, and then you'll be able to get to sleep. Narcolepsy, on the other hand, is a sleep disorder that's believed to be genetic. This is when someone has uncontrollable sleep attacks. They can be completely alert and talking, and the next minute they're sound asleep. And they go directly into REM. It takes us like an hour to get into REM sleep. As soon as they fall asleep, they go into REM, and many have these very vivid, bizarre, wild dreams during this sleep attack. The sleep attacks vary among people. Some can last a couple minutes. Some people have them for up to 10 or more minutes, and some people have them on a daily basis, and some people maybe only once a week. It affects everyone very differently. This can be controlled through medication now, which is good. Xyrem is one of those drugs. Before this, people with narcolepsy couldn't drive or have a job, that they dealt with anything dangerous because they never knew when the sleep attack was coming on. Many of them don't feel drowsy beforehand. They're fine, and then they immediately fall asleep. Only about 1% of the population suffer from narcolepsy. Sleep apnea. Many of you probably know someone with sleep apnea. This is when someone stops breathing for maybe up to a minute throughout the night, and then they start to snort and gasp. It's not really like they wake back up. They just kind of shuffle and breathe again. And that's due to there's a collapse of the muscles in the throat. They start to close off the airway, and then an impulse goes to the brain, hey, I'm not breathing, and they start to gasp, and that opens back up, and this process happens throughout the night. So they wake up not feeling very rested. One telltale sign of sleep apnea is very loud snoring. There are risk factors. The older you are and the heavier you are, the more at risk you are for sleep apnea. There is a treatment, the CPAP mask here, which pumps in oxygen and is very helpful in keeping the airway open. Another sleep disorder is night terrors. Night terrors are more common in children and more common in males. People usually outgrow them as they get older, but some adults do suffer from night terrors. So what's happening is normally a child, throughout the night, they may start screaming and have this look of terror on their face. Their eyes are usually open. This is in stage 4. So they're not dreaming, and their mind is very inactive or groggy. So if you wake them up, they'll be very confused. They have no idea where they're at, and if you wake them up in the living room or if they're sitting up in their bed, and they might be confused if you tell them that they were screaming, because they will not have any recollection of it. Sleep experts recommend just allowing the child to scream, and they'll lay back down and they won't remember any of it. Again, they're not sure what causes this. There's been some research that may indicate it could be some stressful situation in the child's life at that time, but it has been inconclusive at this point. The next thing we're going to look at are dreams. We'll look at the different parts of dreams according to Freud, and then we'll look at 3 different dream theories, why we dream. So Sigmund Freud was one who wrote a lot about the purpose of dreams. He believed that we dream for psychological purposes, and we'll talk about his theory in a moment. He believed that we have 2 different parts to our dreams, the manifest content and the latent content. So the manifest content would be what you would remember from a dream when you wake up. The latent content would be the psychological reason or meaning behind that dream. For example, let's say you were dreaming about falling. That's the manifest content. The latent meaning behind that could be that perhaps you are feeling like you're overwhelmed and your life is out of control. Let's say you are having a dream about someone giving birth, a baby being born. So that's the manifest content. The latent content, the hidden meaning, could be you're giving birth to a new idea or experience a new transition in your life. So that would be the hidden meaning or the latent content. So Sigmund Freud, as I said, was one of the first to look at the purpose of dreams. He believed that we dream for psychological purposes, so it's not a physical purpose. He came up with what's called the wish fulfillment theory, and according to his theory, we dream to get rid of inappropriate wishes or desires or feelings that we have inside of us that are unacceptable. So if we dream about them, that'll kind of rid the body of these inappropriate things, and then we won't act upon them. Freud wrote a book about dreams in early 1900, The Interpretation of Dreams. And in this book, he talks about the different possible dream scenarios and what the hidden meaning or the latent content would be for those different scenarios. There are also 2 physiological reasons or purpose or theories or physical theories behind why we dream. The first one is the information processing theory. According to this theory, we take information that we've learned or been exposed to throughout the day, and we sort and store them into the different memory centers in the brain. Now, people who support this theory, which was proposed in 1993, refer to it as a learning theory, because things that we're learning and encountering throughout the day we will store for later use while we're dreaming. They do find that people who are alcoholics or take sleeping pills tend to suffer memory loss because REM sleep is decreased, dream sleep is decreased if you use some depressant. Also, we find in sleep studies that we dream more during times of learning. So college students who participate in the research, they allowed sleep studies to be conducted on them in a sleep lab, and they found that during the semester while they were learning, they spent a lot more time in REM as opposed to the summer months when they were not learning. We also find that the younger you are, the more time you spend in REM, which makes sense. Think of all the new things that young children are experiencing and learning and coming in contact with. So it makes sense that they would need more REM sleep in order to sort and store that information as opposed to, let's say, someone my age around 50. And the second physical theory, or physiological theory, is the activation synthesis theory. Okay, this theory would say, as you can see there, dreams are the brain's interpretation of their own activity. So what's happening here is the pons are very active, and they are sending impulses up to the cerebral cortex. Now, while you're awake and alert, every impulse that comes in through your senses, everything you see, hear, taste, touch, and smell, will go to the cerebral cortex for you to process and interpret. Okay? During sleep, all of your senses are cut off, but the pons are very active, and they're sending those impulses up to the brain, and the cerebral cortex does its job, and it tries to interpret them. However, these impulses are just random. Therefore, according to this theory, that's why many of our dreams are very bizarre, because our brain is just trying to piece together random impulses.